Welcome to Real Estate in Real Time. I'm Woody Zimmerman here with Mark Skabowski of Remax Lakes. Welcome to the show.
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Doing well. And we got a bunch of questions that, because we always ask people to submit questions. So we compiled a bunch of questions. And we're going to talk about, or we're going to give those answers here today.
We're sure going to try. So this is, you're testing me now.
Mm-hmm.
You know what you're talking about, I guess. So I'm over here shaking.
Yeah.
I'm nervous. I don't know if I'll be able to handle this.
I'm sure you'll do fine. I'm sure you'll do fine. All right. So one of the questions that we had a listener submit: what does contingent accepting backup offers mean?
We get asked that question a lot, and It's funny that somebody actually emailed and said, "Hey, what is this?"
Mm-hmm.
So, in Kosciuszko County, when we accept an offer, when a listing agent accepts an offer on a property, we change, and it is contingent on financing and/or inspections.
Mm-hmm.
We switch it to contingent accepting backup offers.
Okay.
So that is different than contingent with the first right. So a first right contingency means that the individual that has the accepted offer has a house to sell that they need to get an accepted offer on in order to complete the purchase. So many times people, they've got a house to sell, I can buy it. Well, actually you can't. Contingent accepting backup offers simply means it's contingent on financing and/or inspections, and you cannot move that offer out of primary position unless one of those contingencies is not met or fails. So if it falls apart due to inspections, you'll see the house come back on the market or back to active status. If the appraisal doesn't happen properly, if the appraised value doesn't come in, if the buyer loses their job, and I actually had this happen not too long ago, within 3 days, we switched the house to contingent accepting backup offers because the buyer wrote contingent on financing and inspections. And, I get a call from the buyer's agent 3 days later. Oh my God, you're not going to believe this, but the buyer's company got bought out and they're eliminating their position.
Ooh, wow.
So, so contingent accepting backups is contingent on inspections and/or financing.
How is contingent different than pending?
Okay, so that's another question we get. Why can't I find a listing anymore? Right? I know it's active, but I can't find it anymore.
Okay.
So if the offer is not contingent on financing or inspections, or if the listing agency decides, hey, we're going to mark this pending, meaning a pending sale, it disappears. It no longer feeds to Zillow, Realtor.com, all of those things. So that's why in the listing contract, when we sign a listing contract, it says we will continue to market the property until it's sold or until the listing contract expires. So if you go pending, you're no longer marketing the property. Now, nobody's doing anything wrong. It's just many people don't want any more showings. And if it goes pending, it no longer feeds. So pending is very similar to contingent accepting backup offers, with the exception of many times there are no contingencies. It could be a cash offer, and all it is contingent on is getting to the time for closing. So pending generally means no inspections, there is no financing, it's going pending. Now the funny thing is, in Fort Wayne, as soon as they accept an offer, they go pending. Even if it's contingent on financing and inspection.
Yeah, because I see pending a lot over in Fort Wayne. You see that on the signs.
Right. So we do it the Kosciuszko County way.
Yeah, it's a little
That's
different.
One of the chamber things, right?
Yeah,
the Kosciuszko County way.
Yeah.
We do it our way. And quite honestly, that is the way that I think it should be if you're going to continue to market that property. You're going to continue to put it out there on all the websites and things like that. So pending. The second most question that we get is, why can't I find this listing? So kind of goes along with that.
Another question here. What is earnest money?
So earnest money is money that a buyer puts down to say they are earnestly, that's why it's called earnest, they're earnestly interested in buying the property. So in other words, think of it as a deposit. You're putting that listing on hold. so that you can do your financing and or inspection. So when you get an accepted offer, part of that offer is earnest money. Now the interesting piece out there is you can actually have a valid contract with no earnest money. There are sellers out there going, what? Why would I ever do that?
Yeah, sure.
I've done numerous to where you might have sellers that know each other. I'm sorry, a seller and a buyer that know each other.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And they're like, you know what? We don't need any earnest money. We know they're going to buy it.
Yeah.
So you can actually write a valid contract with zero earnest money. Yeah. Now, as a seller, in 99 out of 100 times, you're not going to accept that. It's not a good idea, but you can. So earnest money is really a deposit. If you think of it as a deposit, and that goes into a non-interest bearing escrow account at typically the listing agency. It's there. If something falls apart in the transaction, when we're talking contingencies, so contingent on inspections, if we don't make it through inspections, we negotiate about what happens with the earnest money. If the appraisal doesn't come in right, 9 times out of 10, you're giving that money back from a seller. You're giving the money back to the buyer because one of the contingencies is the ability to get financing. And the appraisal is part of the financing piece. So in a pending transaction, when you give your earnest money, if there are no contingencies, as a buyer, whatever you give as that earnest money, you're going to get a credit if you go all the way to closing, but it's unlikely you're going to get that money back if you just change your mind to decide you don't want to buy. You're probably going to lose that earnest money.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Mark is answering your questions here today. We'll be right back. You're listening to Real Estate in Real Time. Welcome back. You're listening to Real Estate in Real Time here with Mark Skabowski of Remax Lakes, and we're answering questions here today, or Mark is answering questions here today. The previous question was, what is earnest money? Now, the next question, which you answered, but the next question is, how much should it be?
Yeah, so if you Google earnest money, you'll find that typically it's 1% of the purchase price.
Okay.
That is kind of an established industry norm. So there's the norm, and there's what happens in reality.
Yeah.
So on a $100,000 house, 1% of the earnest money or the purchase price would be $1,000. Well, if you think that through, a lot of times people that are buying houses that are $100,000 don't have $1,000. They're using 100% financing. They're asking the seller to pay their closing costs. They probably don't have $1,000.
Okay.
But they've got $500. So many times on houses, we see earnest funds around $500 to $1,000. I mean, even up to $200,000 houses, we see $1,000 for earnest money.
Okay.
On $1 million house, essentially, would you take your house off the market for $500?
No.
So that's where the old 1% came in. And from a buyer's perspective, you can use that earnest money as part of your negotiation and showing the strength of your offer.
Yeah.
So if you're in a really competitive situation, if you have the ability to put more money down for earnest money, a larger deposit, then you're in a stronger position with the seller. If you've got 2 offers out, all being even, and one has got $5,000 in earnest money and one's got $1,000 in earnest money, as a seller, what do? That's a stronger offer.
Yeah.
If by chance, for whatever reason, a buyer changes their mind, I get to keep $5,000, not $1,000. Now, again, I say gets to keep. The seller doesn't make that decision. There's a lot of things that go into play with that, but that's one of the other questions is what happens to the earnest money, right? Well, I talked a little bit before the break about going to closing. It's a credit with you to the buyer. If it falls apart, and when I say falls apart, meaning we have to negotiate. So inspections is the biggest one. Everybody's thought process on inspections is, well, I'll just ask them to fix it, and they have to fix it. That is not the case.
Yeah.
The purchase agreement spells out what a defect is. It clearly defines. It's a very broad topic. There is no book we can go to that say that these are defects. But if there is a defect, as defined in Indiana, which is something that impacts the safety, habitability, or long-term valuation of the property, that's the brief summary of what the defect is, then the seller has to fix it or disclose it to somebody else. So if you're in that transaction and radon, that's the one. That is a clearly defined defect. There's a clear defined level. If the house has radon above 4.0 or 4.0 or above picocuries per liter, then the seller needs to fix it, or the buyer can get out and get their earnest money back. If the seller says, no, I'm not fixing it, the buyer can get out. And I know we've spent a lot of time on earnest money, but it's your money.
Yeah.
It is not the seller's money. That's probably the best way to describe it. It's a deposit. It is not the seller's money. It's a credit to the buyer at closing, unless something happens in between, and then we negotiate to get the money back. And let's leave it at that.
Okay.
It's
All right.
a pretty deep topic.
Okay,
so.
changing gears. This is a really, really good question. Why should I pay list price or above on a house?
Oh my, it goes back to what's your why?
Yeah.
What's your situation? Is the house worth it to you? Because there's two things that need to happen. It needs to be attractive to you. It needs to make sense for you. The seller needs to accept it. So I guess there's really three. The bank has to accept it if you're financing. So, but in today's competitive marketplace, gone are the days of offering 10% below and negotiating up. In general, if something's brand new on the market, you're gonna buy it at list price or above, probably. If it's on the market for 30 days, 60 days, in all likelihood, they may very well negotiate with you. But why put yourself at a disadvantage? That, and I answer that question a lot. Why would you recommend list price? But that is what I do. If something's on the market one day and they're showing, there's 15 showings today, meaning it's a competitive house, why would you offer less than list price? Do you want to win it? Do you want this house? Or do you just want to write an offer?
Yeah.
That's why.
That's
the answer why.
Right. And I want to get this question in here. This is too good to not talk about. Why do I need a pre-approval? I know how much I can afford.
Oh my!
Yeah.
Oh my! Yeah, Rod is over there falling on the floor, right?
Yeah.
We all think we know what we can afford, but we're not lenders. I'm not a lender. I don't understand all the underwriting stuff. Don't want to. I sell houses, right? That's what I do. I let lenders do their job. I'll do my job. The underwriting process, it's like this cloud. Things go in. What's the real answer? I don't know. But just because you can pay $1,200 a month rent does not mean you can afford a $1,200 a month house payment. And why is that? Because there's all these debt to income. You got this late payments. You got credit score. You got all these things that build your credit history. Bottom line, get the pre-approval. If you want to buy, get a pre-approval. That's the answer.
Yes, that is a really good answer, and here's what it comes down to. If you have more questions, you want to have answered, call this guy right here, Mark Skabowski. So, Mark, your contact information?
Sure. The website, skabowskiteam.com. Phone number is 574-834-1233.
And spell Skabowski so they can do skabowskiteam.com.
It's two skis with a bow in between. SKIBOWSKI.
All right. You've been listening to Real Estate in Real Time. Have yourself a wonderful weekend.